Why are the original so-called black people hated so much in the South? Only question till next live. My mum asked this. Okay. Great question, Sonny Fro. Before I answer that, have you pressed the like button yet? If you haven't, please do so now, okay? Okay, so the question is, why are so-called blacks or so-called black people hated so much in the South? The first thing is that I'm glad you said so-called black people, because this is one of the things that we keep emphasizing. We understand why people use that term, and words are very powerful. Words are very important, because when you're saying black people, if you go and research that and look in the dictionaries and look at what they classify as black people, that's not actually us. But we understand, but we need to understand that we are Nubians and not black people. But we know why, so that we can articulate ourselves, because the races are classified as black, white, oriental, etc. But these terms are just labels. And the question is not just hated in the South, worldwide. And I think it's important because it's about truth. When you have to deal with the truth, some people find the truth difficult to deal with, or sweet to the mouth but bitter to the stomach. So when I say truth, it's like we're living in a day and time where truth is being revealed. And in the South especially, this is going back to where there was a lot of tensions and racism, and going back to the so-called civil rights movement, segregation, and all these things where people were looked at, or black people were looked at as being subservient or being less than a man, and even like not regarded as equal, you see. So but the reality is, when you start to look at the contributions of so-called black people to the world, not just the South, you start to find out that the realities of stories that were fabricated and told to people worldwide are now starting to be unraveled. So-called black people never really had the opportunity to tell their own story. So everything people learned about them was through the eyes of other races, right? Through other books or religious books. And in these books, even in just like history, his story, you were depicted to be unsavory, the bad guys, like the whole connotation with the colors and black and white and the racism. And it's like, when you start to break it down and look at the natures of people and what we do as black people, or what people have done over the years, over the last, say, 6,000 years, you start to find a very different story. So now that we are telling our own story, which they deemed a mystery, because remember that when you say history, it's what has been recorded by someone or some people. And so if you went back beyond 6,000 years and start to go back to ancient times, to ancient Africa, and now studies of everyone on the planet have been revealed, down to like DNA, down to what have you done, like even down to creation of the universe and beyond, even down to biblical recordings or scriptures, you'll start to find a different story, which is contradicting what the people in the South or worldwide, other races were trying to talk and say about black people. And so the hatred is really coming from their own God. And like, we did a video called "You Need to Be Endarkened, Not Enlightened," because this all played on racism. Because if God dwells in darkness, because he said, "Let there be light," that means God dwells in darkness. And if you're dark or black and God resides in you, then what will be the opposite to that? Because this is what the games were being played in terms of everything black was given a negative connotation. Blackboard, your blackboard, your, black male, so many words that related to that word black were given negative connotations. And everything white was prescribed or presumed to be purity. Like angels wear white gowns. You get married in a white gown. Everything white is, given the impression that it's clean and, white and right. And if you're black, stay back. So now when you start to go and look at, how these two natures play out, you realize that the truth is far from what was being written in history. And in my story was referred to as a mystery. It's a mystery to people who were not there at the time when we were there in our story, right? So we say prehistory is prehistoric, right? So when we go prehistoric, beyond 6,000 years, beyond the Bible, the Quran, and the Abrahamic religions, right? We start to go into cultures that existed way before the European or the Adamites came on the scene and wrote their history based on when they came on the scene. So now we're living in a day and time where everything is being clarified and renewed, because there's a new cycle of 24,000 years where our story must be renewed and must be told. So of course, if you were the world champion for a very long time and now someone else comes along that knocks you out in the first round, and now you're not the world champion anymore, of course you're going to have that. But this actually goes back to their God. When I say their God, I'm talking about the gods of religion, because he says in Genesis 3 that he was going to put enmity between the serpent and the woman's seed. You see? So when we say the woman's seed, we have to realize who was the first on the planet. It would be the woman. But which woman? Because there's a woman of 6,000 years ago who they refer to as Eve, or the Adamites, where Adam and Eve comes from. And then you have the Eve that goes back millions and millions of years ago to our story, to the African story, where we start to deal with, the Pataites, or these beings that they've found, such as Lucy, and they've found remains and have done a lot of, research to find out, well, who was here first. And then you look at the natures and what each race has done on the planet. The black people, African people, never went around colonizing anyone or subjugating or putting people into slavery or starting wars or stealing people's resources or any of that. So, you have to realize that this enmity, or the word enmity, is really hatred. Yeah. So when you're asking that question about, why they hated, is because you stand for everything that represents God, and to be treated otherwise based on misinformation or distortion of information, where you're now looked upon worldwide as a troublemaker, as somebody that's not organized, somebody that doesn't get along, somebody that only deals with crime. But then when you look at the other side, you're also the most creative, the most giving in terms of what you've given to the world, in terms of, sports, creativity, music, you name it. So, of course, it comes down to that type of jealousy. And all these attributes like enmity and jealousy, right? These are the attributes that the gods of the Bible and the Quran show, which makes no sense, because if you are the creator of everything and you can snap your fingers and create everything and have everything and you're the most powerful, then it would make no sense for you to be jealous of anyone or anything because they've got more than you or they are better than you or whatever the reason is why you say I am a jealous God. Why you say have no other gods but me. Why would you need to say that if you own everything? How can you have emotions which really show that to have emotions like jealousy and hatred, and you look throughout these books, these gods of the Bible are doing a lot of hateful things, drowning and sacrificing things and asking people to give sacrifices of blood and even of children, so yeah, so now it's like the tables are being turned, unfortunately, because our story has to be told, and we are the best people to tell our story. And it's being told by way of Wu-Sabat being the oldest, the first, the original stories where others were grafted from. Their stories come from stories that come from stories that end up back with the original people on the planet first. It's just that we never were really given our own voice. And now with Pana Babyanun, Dr. Malachi Ziyuk coming in and writing all these books on every subject you can think of, every question you can think of, has given the world opportunity to hear our story, and anyone who resonates with truth, anyone who would like to deal with unity and love and caring, and these are the things, these are the attributes of our nature as black people. The world over, I will tell you this. You go on social media now, you won't be surprised to find what you may consider what people call white race. Again, there's no such thing as a white race, but you hear Europeans and Caucasians and Asians and other races are saying this. They're saying Jesus was black. They're saying, we've been mistreated all along, the slavery, all these things. Now people are starting to know the real deal and the truth behind it. How Africa was, basically the resources were divided and shared amongst many nations, and Africa was exploited, and till this day, to a certain degree, still being exploited. So that's the answer to that question for you regarding why black people are hated in the South. And remember that you had people that were given this false information, and you had organizations like the Ku Klux Klan, KKK, wearing white robes with hoods and, terrorizing people back then. And so, again, this is all going back historical, but we're living in a day and time today where we're saying in Wu-Sabat, love and unity. Love is the key, That's really a shuk or divine love, which is unconditional, which is not a easy thing to do, having, been through what we've been through, all right?